I'm Mary Kettl. A lot of you know me from working at Outlaw Ranch the last 5 or 6 years, and some of you know that for 15 years before that, I worked at Atlantic Mountain Ranch. And I'd like to read you a story about a time at AMR when things didn't always go right. The pioneer life. The wind came in hard that afternoon, in gusts that sent ripples and waves through the long grass in the valley at Atlantic Mountain Ranch. The grass shimmered, changing colors and directions with the wind. It would have been pretty if there were not also pieces of my tack barn roof flying through the air. While horses, riders, and I watched from a safe distance, bunched up together in the trees, our helmets buckled firmly under our chins, pieces of sheet metal and corrugated fiberglass the size of your dining room table jerked loose, sailed 20 yards, and crash landed in the grass. When it started to rain, I decided I was done playing pioneer. I had worked for many summers at AMR, living by turns in a cabin, covered wagon, teepee, or the fort, a huge log stockade built when the valley was settled by Lutherans who had come west on the coffee trail. Part of my passion for this place had been because we did things the old-fashioned way. We pumped water, we used lanterns, we cooked over the fire in skillets the size of Volkswagen tires. We rode horses and drove wagons. Over the years, I had learned how to dip candles, make soap, and card wool, which, like algebra and knowing the periodic table of elements, are skills that you probably won't ever need in real life. I have always valued and even bragged about the way that we lived at camp. But on this particular day, it had already been raining for nearly 3 weeks. I was cold and sunburned, and shivering had become my default posture. Staff and campers had been making the best of the cold and muddy conditions, but now, waiting for a cyclone to send my little tack barn to a camp somewhere in Kansas, I thought perhaps we had reached the limits of Protestant suffering. I wondered how the real homesteaders coped with such calamity. I had a pickup and a cordless drill. I could go home at the end of the week. Nobody was in any real danger, but I suddenly sagged at the idea of living this way. I have been enamored with the pioneer lifestyle for years, probably because my mother made me read every single one of the Little House on the Prairie books instead of letting me buy comic books when I was a kid. She regretted this, of course, when I started calling her Ma, and when I started saying things like "Land of Goshen" and "We're burning daylight" every time it was time to leave for the bus stop. When I was that age, I played for hours with Johnny West, who was a 12-inch tall, plastic, jointed action figure, kind of like a Barbie, but more for boys. The Johnny West series also included a wife, 2 kids, and several horses and wagons with removable saddles and harnesses. Johnny West and Geronimo, his plastic Indian friend, were forever migrating up and down our hallway, occasionally giving rides to smiling, round-headed Fisher-Price people who, because they could not hold on, always fell off the wagons. The real pioneers were tough. These were people who left Alabama with banjos on their knees and walked or rode or drove, however awkwardly, for hundreds of miles in search of land or gold. Circling their wagons, they camped out every night without benefit of Gore-Tex or wet wipes, eating lard and varmint sandwiches and reading aloud from the Old Testament for comfort. They built sod huts and log cabins. These were people who had anvils and knew how to use them. People who could use the words "Alamand left" in a sentence. People who, if they had a Facebook page, would probably have posted links to Calico and yodeling. I'm not like them. It was fun to ride my horse in the summer, and it was fun to pan for garnets in French Creek, But I knew that we were only playing at being pioneers. Our food came in big cans, was delivered by a pickup, and if the cook forgot something, he could just text, "Bring butter," to the main site. We didn't have cholera. We did have volleyball. We lived, for a week at a time, a simpler life than most of the rest of the country, but we were a long way from being self-sufficient. We didn't know how much we had. The roof was fixed, the rain eventually stopped, and the corral started to dry up. But I was in a funk for several days after that storm, suddenly anxious and impatient with the weather and the hassle of living without water and electricity. I have a perfectly good house in town, I thought several times. I have a master's degree. I don't need to be this cold or this dirty. For the first time in 20 years of camping, I wondered if it was worth it. On the last night of that week, I sat on a log at a closing campfire with an intergenerational group that we were hosting at the main site. The people ranged in age from 9 to 80, and for over an hour we drank hot chocolate and sang, "This land is your land, can't help falling in love with you, home on the range." It was cold, but we built up the fire and stayed up later than usual, drawing laughter and comfort from each other. There were guitars and lantern lights, and it was enough. These days, I think we all feel like pioneers, trying to make our way in a world that keeps changing. We're all trying to figure out what step to take next and whether it is all worth it. And I tell you, it is.